Welcome back to the channel. Today we are reacting to a video of Sheila Johnson. She is a classically trained violinist, a business woman, as well as a philanthropist. Let me get this video to 100 likes, and as always, don't forget to like, share, watch more videos, and subscribe to the channel.
Teacher, businesswoman, philanthropist. Her life has taken her from Chicago's heartland to the corporate boardroom and to luxury hotels. Her name is Sheila Johnson. The History Makers, the nation's largest African-American video oral history archive, is proud to present An Evening with Sheila Johnson. And now to our host, veteran PBS TV journalist, Miss Gwen Ifill.
Good evening. I'm pleased to be back here again tonight. Let me tell you about the story we're going to hear tonight. From philanthropist to entertainer to sports mogul, she has made her mark. Let's listen. Sheila Johnson. Sheila Johnson. I promised Sheila I would give her what I gave Berry Gordy, which is to say, just a chance to chat and to tell us about her life, which has, I have to say, I want to be her when I grow up. And someone told me I was already grown up, so I'd miss my moment. But I want to start by talking about your roots.
Absolutely.
The basics. Where did you come from?
Well, I was born in McKeesport, Pennsylvania, moved around this entire great country 14 times, and finally settled right here outside of Chicago in Maywood, Illinois. But grew up with two incredible parents. My father was a neurosurgeon, my mother was an accountant, and they gave me the best possible life.
They weren't just incredible, they were extraordinary for African Americans in their time.
Absolutely. I mean, my father really had battles. I mean, in a sense, he still had to struggle as a doctor. There were only 11 neurosurgeons in the country at that time and could not practice in white hospitals. And so that's why I had to move all over the place.
I find that people like to tell the stories of incredibly high-achieving African Americans by talking about our bootstrap stories, how we came from nothing. But in fact, yours is a slightly different story. You came from a solidly middle-class upbringing. Daddy a doctor is pretty much as a middle class or upper class as it gets. Let's take a look at that.
Born to a neurosurgeon father and an accountant mother, Sheila Johnson grew up in Maywood, Illinois, where she began to play the violin at age 8. At Proviso High School, education, violin, and cheerleading became her passions, earning her a music scholarship to the University of Illinois. It was 1966, the height of the Civil Rights Movement. College campuses were rocked by protests and unrest. But Sheila's deep commitment to classical music would only grow stronger.
Now, music was a huge part of your life. Talk about how it wove itself in, even until today. It was your father who you first saw playing the piano.
Oh, yes. He would come home from operations, and, you know, like a lot of people after a stressful day, they hit the bar. My father hit the piano keys.
Can you tell me about some instruments that you know how to play as well as your parents?
And he would sit down and just play Chopin. He would play everything on the piano. He was just a very gifted musician.
Is it true that you actually witnessed him playing with blood on his white coat?
Yes, he would have little spots of blood after, and I would say, Daddy, at least you could change.
You think?
Yeah. But he would drag me to the hospital. He really wanted me to be a doctor more than anything in the world.
What happened?
There was just no way. There was no way.
But let's start by talking about your upbringing, which I guess the best word for it is peripatetic. I love that word, and I think it absolutely applies. I'm a preacher's kid. We moved around a lot. You moved around more.
Because we had to. I mean, my father could not stay in one hospital more than 10 months because they kept transferring him because he was with the VA hospital. So we moved all over the East Coast, a little bit to the Midwest, and then finally settled here. Because he just put his foot down. He said, look, I can't move anymore. I've got to get my family established. So we moved to Maywood, Illinois. But during that time, even with all of the racial unrest, I was able to cross racial lines, and I think it helped me build a resilience.
That's an interesting point, because I hated it at the time, moving. But you learned how to walk in a room.
You really learned how to walk in a room, and you learned how to just assimilate with everyone. And I think that's what's important. It strengthened me in many ways.
So this is interesting. Our Black parents in the 60s had a couple of different ways of responding to their children's deciding that they knew themselves. There were a couple of options. One is to say, you go for it, and the other was to say, who do you think you are?
It was more, growing up in an African-American family, you know, you're seen but really not heard, and if you challenged.
Right.
I was challenging everything from my parents to my teachers. I could never take no for an answer. And that's who I am. You know, don't tell me I can't do something, because the more you say you can't do something, the more I'm going to challenge you.
When in your life do you think you were first exposed to the concept of race?
I would say all the way back as far as kindergarten, because I remember going to play with a little girl, and some mother yelled at me, and she said, you know what, we don't allow, and she used the N-word
Really?
in her house.
In kindergarten?
In kindergarten, and I do remember that. Now, in the second grade, we moved to Louisville, Kentucky, and now my father was very fair. My mother was not. And this was right during segregation, and I was not allowed to go to the white schools. And my father would not have anything to do with it. And we pulled it off for a whole year down in Louisville, Kentucky. My mother could never show up at the school. But I went to this little elementary school in the second grade, and he would show up. He would take me to school. They never knew. They never knew it. And we pulled it off until we had to move again.
It was that proviso that you mentioned where you began to learn about how to assert yourself and how to be in charge and how to push back a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, those were times that were daunting because the world was changing. And you could feel it changing, and all the way into, by the time I got to the University of Illinois, I mean, all H broke loose. But it was just the way, it was the time when I had to grow up and really figure out who I really was, what was going to motivate me and where I was going to go in life. And I had decided I was going to be a violinist and a teacher. And there were teachers that, you know, would not let me do what I needed to do, and I had to push back. And this really even continued all the way through college, because the time I made the cheerleading squad at the University of Illinois, they asked me to leave the music school. And I said, why? And they said, well, we don't have cheerleaders in the music school. So I had to go and petition with Dan Perino to get myself back into the University of Illinois School of Music, and I will never forget that.
You were the only black.
I was the first
black
African,
cheerleader.
yes, at the University of Illinois.
Why did you want to be a cheerleader?
I was a cheerleader in high school, a cheerleader in elementary school. That was before Title IX. And I love sports, and I love being athletic.
Do you remember any cheers?
I remember on proviso, ever loyal, whatever it was.
You know she remembers more, but she's not going to do them tonight.
We're loyal to you, Illinois. We're orange and blue, Illinois.
I don't remember any of that stuff. That's good. Let's go respect your musical roots because
Yes.
I am, of all the things you could have done, like you just sang a little bit for us, you have a lovely singing voice, but you were drawn to violin. What
Yes.
about the violin?
I don't know what it was, but my father always wanted me to, and my brother, we had to take piano lessons, which I'm glad he made us do, because that really gave me a basis. Something about the violin really intrigued me. I don't know whether it was the complexity of it. I loved the way it sounded, and it was a challenge.
But what did you plan to do with that? You said you planned to be a music teacher. That was your goal.
My goal, well, I love playing in the orchestra, and I love playing string quartets, and I love playing solos. And I did all of that, but I also love teaching. I love teaching children how to make music. And I think that every child in this country should be exposed to music because it helps you to focus, you become so organized, teaches you to listen, it teaches communication.
But do you
Tell me about some of the great loves that you have in your life.
worry that we're doing that less and less and
I
less?
worry about it all the time. I mean, everything has changed. They're so into technology that they've lost the basis of communication. I taught at the lab school also in Washington, D.C., and we discovered the kids at the age of 3 who cannot repeat simple rhythmic patterns at the age of 3 are going to be very poor readers. Reading is rhythmical. Everything we do, from spelling to walking, all of this is rhythmical. It is all the foundation of music.
And it's how you got recruited to go to the University of Illinois.
Yes, and I have to say Susan Sterrett played a huge part in that.
Tell me about your relationship.
Well, Susan and I think it was her first job coming out of college, and we just connected. Of course, you set boundaries, teacher and student, but I admired her and still do. Admired her very much. She really, there's a presence about her, and there's character there and integrity. And even though my parents taught me all of that, to see that through someone else, she was really a role model. I remember even standing in front of the mirror practicing the violin, so I looked like her playing the violin. But she was also the person that I could communicate with. You know, you can communicate with your parents, but it's always nice to have someone else. And she was there for me. She rooted for me, and she helped me get into college and pick the right teachers. And she's, to this day, has watched over me. She's my guardian angel.
And now Susan Sterrett. That's all right. That's Carolyn Hanson on the piano. Thank you both very much. Playing Mendelssohn's Spring Song. Now, tell me about Paul Roland.
Paul Roland was my taskmaster teacher. I mean, he was the person that all violinists, especially from this state and beyond, wanted to study with. And to get the opportunity to study with Paul Roland, you have hit the top.
And that's what the Illinois String Research Project was.
Yes, and he started the Illinois String Research Project because when Suzuki came into the country, the Department of Education was very, very worried about Suzuki taking over the string teaching method. So he got a grant, it was a $500,000 grant from the Department of Education to study how we can better train string students in this country. So he started the University of Illinois String Research Project, and I was the only undergrad that was recruited into this project.
It strikes me you were a very different kind of student on that campus. It was the 1960s. Everything everywhere was in uproar. You're a black student, but at one point considered joining a white sorority. You were great at violin, white music.
Yes.
Whatever. It must have been different for you to be a standout on that campus at that time.
It was. I was really in a vacuum.
Right.
Because at the time, you had the black fraternities and sororities, and they thought that I was too fair to be a part of that.
Yeah.
But yet I didn't fit into the white community either, so I was sort of this oddball at the University of Illinois, the only African American in the School of Music.
Now, it's not insignificant that you were 16 when you went to college.
That's right.
And you were 20 when you got married for the first time.
I was 20 when I got married.
Now, at 20, I barely knew my way from here to there.
And neither did I. So, go figure.
But getting married early put you on another path.
It did. I met Bob Johnson, and I was intrigued with him. And the thing that stood out, he had a fire in his belly. He really wanted to set the world on fire, like I wanted to. And so I said, I'm going to hitch my wagon to him, and we could change the world. And in a way, we did.
Absolutely.
We changed it.
Well,
we did what we had to do.
Well, among other things, you got to live abroad, you got to found companies, but you also, your marriage and your connection also brought you to Washington, D.C. for the first time.
Brought it to Washington, D.C. He wanted to go into the Foreign Service, and it didn't work out. It was not his cup of tea, and so he came and worked for the Corporation of Public Broadcasting, and I started working at Sidwell Friends School.
Let's take a look.
Okay.
Therefore, I shall resign the presidency effective at noon tomorrow.
1972, the year of the Watergate scandal, would bring the young couple to the nation's capital, where Sheila taught music at the prestigious Sidwell Friends School. She also created a youth orchestra, and this led to an invitation from Queen Noor of Jordan to establish a music conservatory there. By 1979, they convinced TCI's John Malone to loan them $500,000 to found Black Entertainment Television.
I want to showcase the dynamic vitality of the Black entertainment community. Yeah.
Sheila, who signed the loan on BET's first Georgetown office, would later serve as BET's Executive Vice President of Community Affairs. Balancing her responsibilities, she would also become the doting mother of her daughter, Paige, and her son, Brett, before she and her husband sold the network to Viacom in 2001.
No complaints and no regrets. I still believe in chasing dreams and placing bets. I have learned all you give is all you get. So give it all you got.
my share, I drink my fill, and even though I'm satisfied, I'm hungry still to see what's down another road beyond the hill, and do it all again. So here's to life
and every joy it brings.
Here's to life, to dreamers and their dreams.
Funny how the time just flies, how love can go from warm hellos to sad goodbyes and leave you with the memories you memorize to keep your winters warm.
For there's no yes in yesterday, and who knows what tomorrow brings or takes away. But as long as I'm still in this game, I'm gonna play for laughs, for life, for love. So here's to life
And every joy it brings.
Here's to life, to dreamers and their dreams. May all your storms be weathered, and all that's good get better.
Here's to life.
Here's to love.
Here's to you.
Everett Green and Joan Colasso. Thank you. Okay, so you get to Washington, D.C., and you don't aim low, you aim high, and you launched this teaching career you've been aiming for at no less an institution than Sidwell Friends School, which is one of the most elite schools in the nation.
Absolutely.
How did you end up there?
They were looking for a music teacher, but they really wanted a teacher that could play the guitar. And I said, well, I need this job desperately. I'm going to say that I can play the guitar because I could either teach myself. But once I got in there and got to really talk with the faculty, I told them what I really wanted to do was to really start a string orchestra. They became one of the top orchestras in the city of Washington. We call them Young Strings in Action because they just didn't sit and play, but they moved around and performed. And they performed everywhere from at the Corcoran Ball to the Woolly Mammoth theaters. I mean, they were performing all the time. And the greatest day that I remember was when we were performing at the old post office pavilion, and Queen Noor's delegation had come in. I guess they were doing a tour of the city and just happened to be in there. And
Queen Noor of Jordan.
Of Jordan, yes. And so I did end up at the Jordanian ambassador's home, and there were nothing but men in there, and they quizzed me on my politics, and they wanted to know a lot about Jesse Jackson. They said, do you like Jesse Jackson? I said, yes, yeah.
What year was this?
Oh, God, this was 1970s.
So before he ran for president.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. So they were quizzing me, and this went on for 2 hours. And then after that was over, the women came in, and they were carrying food, and the party started. It was really quite an honor. So we became sort of the cultural ambassadors with the United States Information Agency. They brought the kids back 4 times, and it was not just about music, but it was about politics and the whole culture of how we can really get along.
Once again, expanding your and their horizons.
Exactly.
How do you get from that to BET?
Well, this is really interesting. Someone had to make some money to pay the bills. And we were not pulling in a dime. So we were struggling and getting BET started, and we were only on, 2 hours a week when we started out.
Really?
Yeah, and we had some pretty bad programming. I mean,
I do remember that.
Petey Green?
Yeah.
Yeah, we had Petey Green eating some collard greens and some pork chops on air, and this is how that's how bad the programming was. We were desperate. We had to get on the air. It was a struggle. It was hard getting advertisers, because that's what pays the bills.
But when did it explode? When did it turn? When did you go from worrying about paying the mortgage to having success on your hands?
Oh, that was about 5 to 6 years in. We
Wow.
knew that it was going to start moving. But you also have to understand, John Malone really kept us afloat.
Right.
All the way to the very end. You know, we were very lucky to get that $3 billion sale from Viacom. Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't think that will ever happen again.
No, probably not.
We were very, very lucky.
I want to talk about Teen Summit.
That's my show.
So, Don, did you peep that? Did you notice how one hand always washes the other hand? Nobody can ever do it by themselves. It always takes a team. Let me know your thoughts about that in the comments.
That was your show.
That was my show.
And that was huge.
I wanted to start that show because I don't know if you all remember when the videos started. They started out really nice. They told a story. It was almost like little mini documentaries that were fun to watch. And then suddenly, I would say about 7 months in, they went south real quick. And I was very disturbed about what I saw on the screen and the way young girls were being portrayed. I didn't like it at all. Young people said, well, you just don't understand our music. I said, I'm a musician. I understand your music, but I don't like what I'm seeing on the screen. And I started this show because I wanted these young people to have a voice. Our young people, for some reason, and our parents, they don't really talk to one another. And this was an opportunity where I could get a group, I called them my posse, of 25 young people, where on Friday evenings we could discuss issues that we wanted to talk about live on Saturday morning and really start a dialogue and a communication of what's really going on in their lives. And I felt as though that they could talk with their own peer levels. So it was just like us having this conversation here. They had that conversation on Teen Summit. We shot in front of a live studio audience, and these young kids would really talk about anything from, we called it checkerboard dating, to HIV, even talking about sex.
Yeah.
And we did a show where we had the parents come. Well, one of the posse members told the parents, says, Mom, I'm having sex with my girlfriend. Well, the woman passed out. I mean, but I think more than anything, it really helped them communicate better. And one of the things that we did launch, and we did this through the Clinton administration, remember the Teen Pregnancy Prevention Program? That launched on Teen Summit. And that was huge because at that time, there was an enormous epidemic of teen pregnancy, and it's probably still going on. They're just not talking about it anymore. But especially in the Mississippi area, Texas had a huge teen pregnancy rate. But we traveled all over the country to really talk about these issues, and I had doctors that would go with me, but this was something that was really important. But it was a magazine format show where we talked about the issues, and just like as we're doing this, we also had music, and we had our little fly girls on the side. But it was an amazing show.
It's about this time in your life where this theme begins to emerge, which is transforming. You kept transforming yourself. You decided that when you moved on from BET, you moved on from your first marriage, and somewhere along the way, you discovered Salamander Farms.
Yeah, this is really interesting because I was going through a major transition in my life then. And, you know, as anybody who's going through a divorce, you're trying to figure out, who am I? Where am I going to go? Where's my passion? What's going to keep me going? Now, most people, women, they sit back and they're still licking their wounds and they don't know which way they wanted to go. I knew that I wanted to do something. I didn't know exactly what it was, but I was restless. And all of the work that I had done behind the scenes in BET and really had done what I needed to do to get that company successful. And it was very interesting because when I moved to the Middleburg area and I bought this farm, first it was called Cotswold. So when I met with Bruce Sunland face to face and asked him if I could have the name, and he says, of course you can. I said, well, what does the salamander mean? He says, well, it really means it's the only animal that can walk through fire and still come out alive. And you know if you chop off its limbs, they regenerate. And I said, you know what? Hit me right in the face. I said, I'm the salamander. And it stands for perseverance, fortitude, and courage.
You walked through fire and you came
still
out alive.
come out alive. And from that point on, I became the salamander, and I was going to move forward. And I was not only going to come out alive, but I was going to come out on top. And that was what was important.
And another way of describing it is that when doors close, windows open.
Yeah.
Let's take a look.
In 2005, Sheila founded Salamander Hotels and Resorts, opening her flagship Salamander Resort and Spa in Middleburg, Virginia, 8 years later.
The resort doesn't feel like a hotel. They really do feel like they've walked into a grand home.
She also made history when she became a partner in Monumental Sports and Entertainment as the first African-American woman to own 3 major sports franchises. The WNBA's Washington Mystics, the NBA's Wizards, and the NHL's Capitals.
And she's money again in the clutch.
No, I can sleep the night before, but I'll tell you, if we lose, I don't sleep very well that night.
Her philanthropy has taken her from care to the Jackie Robinson Foundation, Parsons, the New School for Design, and establishing a fellowship at Harvard University. For Sheila Johnson, this is just the beginning.
Okay, just the beginning. I want you to indulge me and talk to me a little bit about the power of transformation. I think most people reach midlife and they think, okay, I'm done. This is as far as it's going to take me. I don't really have the energy. I don't want to try. But you, at every step along the way, have tried something completely different from what you did before.
Absolutely. Something has happened in my life when I decided to make that switch. And I don't know why it happened, but things started to happen for me personally. It's when I decided to start a new life. I not only met my new wonderful husband, which is a whole other story.
Who is here tonight.
He's here tonight.
Where is he?
He's right here in the
Oh,
front.
hi. Say hi. Tell everybody hi. William Newman, Judge William Newman.
But opportunities came along. Now, they weren't in my face opportunities, but you know what? I learned to open up more, to really see what was going on around me, and to see what was really speaking to me. So I got a call one day about buying 347 acres of Pamela Harriman's property. And I said, well, let me go see the property. I walked up on there, and the light bulb went off. I said, I'm going to build a resort. Yeah, I knew the struggles of the town. I knew what was going on and what wasn't going on. The town was in economic turmoil. And I said, you know, I'm here. I have the financial ability to make changes. So one of the things that I did is every time I came into Middleburg, I was very offended by one building, and it had a Confederate flag in the window. It was a gun shop. And every time I drove in, this went on for about a year or two. And I finally called my lawyer. I said, there's this building in town I want to buy. I said, don't tell them who I am. I'm going to buy this building. And I bought it. And I took that flag right out of that window. I then gutted it. And I turned it into the most beautiful, it's won design awards, food market. And you can have breakfast, lunch, and dinner there. I work with the farmers in the area. Everything's organic. And then I started a huge garden on my own farm, which I supply that market. I decided that I was going to build this resort, and I had a little announcement up on the property. Everybody showed up, from County Board of Supervisors to Willard Scott, you name them. They grazed through my food. They thought it was a wonderful idea. The next day, I was going to Dulles Airport, and there were signs on both sides of the road that said, "Don't be E.T. Middleburg." And
Don't be E.T. Middleburg?
Yep. So you know what was starting to happen.
Wow.
I forgot I was south of the Mason-Dixon line. And some people don't think the Civil War's over.
Yeah.
So for the next 10 years, I fought the battle. I'll call it the Battle of Sheila and Middleburg. I mean, it was horrendous. The racial hate mail that I got.
Really?
Oh, yeah. And it just escalated. And it went on. There were terrible articles in newspapers being written about me of how I was destroying the countryside. And it just went on. And there were hearings after hearings after hearings. But at the end of 10 years, I won.
10 years.
10 years. I hung in there. Because I really believed this resort was they needed this. That resort is up, as you saw. Not only has it changed in a great way the economic structure, it's very diverse, but what is more important, I have African Americans that are coming into that town, and you see them jogging through the town and walking and shopping, and the economy couldn't be better.
But okay, here's the real thing. On one hand, you've created this wonderful hospitality enterprise. You revived this town, which tried to drive you out. That's great. You could have been done. But somehow you become an owner of 3 sports teams.
This is a story about never burn your bridges. I had gotten to know Abe Poland, and he was the owner of the Wizards. Abe Poland also had the same sort of struggle of building an arena in downtown Washington over in Chinatown. And Washington, D.C. was bankrupt, and he really persevered, and he was able to get this arena built. And I was really behind him vocally and supporting him. And one day he approached me and he said, "Sheila, I would like you to come to my office next Tuesday at 2 o'clock. And I said, "For what?" He says, "You'll see." So I went in and I just barely got in my seat, and he goes, "Sheila, I'm an old man, and I really would like you to be the face of the Washington Mystics." And I was stunned. I was stunned because a woman has never been offered a sports team, never. And I said, "Why me?" And he goes, "Why not you?" And I said, "Well, I'm intrigued." He says, "You really would be the best owner for this team." And I said, "Well, I've got to see the financials." He says, "I will give them to you right now." And he says, I'd really like to know in about 48 hours what you're going to do. Otherwise, I got to move on. So, and he says, "This is highly confidential. Do not speak to anyone about it." Of course, I got in the car, called my lawyer. And I said, "Sandy, I'm on my way." I said, "I got to talk to you about something important." And I said, "I know I don't have an appointment, but I've been offered a sports team." He says, "Sheila, you're not going to buy a sports team." He says, "Do not." He says, "They don't make money." I said, "If you were offered a sports team, would you take it?" And he was silence. I said, "I know you would." See, and that's what men do. They just plunge right on into it. I said, "I will be there in 10 minutes. So in that 10 minutes, I thought about it, and I said, why should I just own the women's team? Why can't I go for all of them? And so I got to the office, and I said, I want you to call Ted Leonsis. He owns the Capitals, and I know he has first right of refusal with the Wizards. I said, let's make him an offer he can't refuse. So I talked to Ted, and he loved the idea. He says, let me take it back to the other partners. And they voted me in, and I'm vice chairman of Monumental Sports and Entertainment.
You know, I don't quite know how you keep all of these balls in the air, because we've talked about your transformation in your career as a musician, your transformation as an educator, your transformation as an entertainment mogul, as a hospitality mogul, and now as a sports mogul. And in the middle of all this, or along the way, you also kind of transformed your personal life, something that women often overlook.
Yes.
When you married your lovely husband here.
Yes.
How much did you think to yourself, oh, there's this other piece I have to figure out while I was doing all this other success?
I had no intention of getting married again. I can tell you that right now. But the day that I went to go get my divorce, I saw this judge sitting up. And I said, I think I know this man. Bill and I actually did a play together called Ceremonies and Dark Old Men. There were open auditions for this part in Ceremonies, and so I just went and auditioned. I got a call 2 weeks later saying I got the part. That little 25 minutes up on the stage, I got paid 3 times the amount of money doing that than when I was teaching. And so this play ran for 98 performances, and we closed it down. So then I never saw that. Now, I was married at the time. I was a good girl. I never saw him again until I walked into that courtroom for my divorce. And so I turned to my lawyer and I said, I think I know the judge. He goes, no, 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 no. I said, I haven't seen him in over 30 years. He said, good. He says, let's get this done. And I did. And then he says, now you can go talk to him. I said, Your Honor, may I approach the bench? And I said, do you remember me? And he goes, oh, yes, I do. And he kept his face. So one day, I was shortly after, well, after we got married, I was taking my son to school, and I was listening to Tom Joyner and Sybil, because she says, can you believe that story about Sheila Johnson and Bill Newman?
I heard that.
You heard that? He says, where it said, to the bailiff, 2 martinis and hold the olives.
I want to talk about the loves of your life, Paige and Brett.
Yes.
Tell us about your kids.
My kids are extraordinary. They're very smart. My daughter, since the age of 3, has always wanted to be on the back of a horse, and that
Paint me a picture in the comments about the loves in your life.
happened when I was at a cable meeting down in Antigua. And she was this really rambunctious little girl, and she wouldn't sit still. And so I took her down there. 4 hours later, she was still on the back of the horse. And that has continued. She's 30 years old. She's professional. She was on the Nations Cup team. She's won 2 major Grand Prix.
Wow.
She runs her business herself. My son, Brett, he has become an incredible designer of men's outerwear. I travel with him to Italy, and he really wants me to check everything that he does, from his sketches all the way to the fabrics.
That's great. I also find amazing that at some point in all of your career and all of your successes, you have to stop and take and assess and figure out what does it mean. What do you tell young women, like you talked a moment ago about why not me? But what do you tell young women in particular who think, and I personally don't believe you can have it all at the same time, but
No.
you're living proof that you can have it all in a serial fashion.
Right. What I tell young women, first and foremost, you have really got to know yourself. You can't let other people define who you are. You got to not listen to those outside voices. You would be surprised how your life is really molded by all those outside voices. And we never take the time to really get to know who we are. What's our passion in life? What is it we really want to do? Who do we really want to be? What really excites us? What really gets us out of bed every morning? And I don't think that parents really listen to their own children and get to know who they really are. Because you've got to really get to know who your child is, and then you want to nurture the child. And that's one thing that I learned very early. And I have to say that my parents did give me that gift. They let me be me.
Philanthropy.
Yes.
How does giving back work into all of this?
My mother taught me that from the very beginning. I remember even in high school, we would have the football team over. My mother was always cooking for them and feeding them. And even dear Susan Sterrett, who was single at the time and always looked too thin to me, and we were always feeding her. And I mean, she was always helping neighbors, and she just had the most generous heart, almost to a fault. But she's the one that gave me the heart of generosity. And I have to tell you, the reason why I work as hard as I do and I do what I do is to be able to give back. I am thrilled to be able to help so many young people. This program that I have at Harvard at the Kennedy School for Public Leadership, at the end of 5 years, I'm going to have 50 extraordinary leaders that, from underserved communities that are getting a full ride. They do not have to worry about health insurance, their tuition. They just need to learn. And they need to learn to be leaders. They call me Mama J. I am there for them 24/7. I have one that has been completely homeless, and he put himself through school, through construction. I got him into Wharton, and now he's with me at Harvard. This is what motivates me, to be able to change lives. We need to start grooming leaders in the African American community. I am worried.
We end these conversations by asking our history makers to talk about their legacy, what they want to leave. You've just outlined a pretty good answer to that question. Is there more to it than that? Is it about what you create when you're not here?
When I leave this earth, I want people to remember me of what I've been able to give them. That the way I've been able to change lives, how I've been able to make a difference for many, many young people. And if that's the way I leave this earth, I will be very happy.
Sheila Johnson, thank you. We have another treat. We've come full circle. We've talked about achievement. We've talked about music. And now we have Kindred, the Family Soul.
So honored to be here, and as one of the young people who's got their first opportunity to be on television on Teen Summit, I just want to tell you thank you and dedicate this performance to you. I look in the mirror, what do I see? I see my power, my ability. I see tenderness, righteousness, optimism, and a bit of fear, I guess. But no matter what I see, my eyes can tell me what I already know. I'm best as what I am, and I don't need nobody to tell me so, 'cause I am a girl, I am a woman, I am connected to the earth and the sky. I know the secrets they only dream of. I love myself, and I'm gonna tell you why. I am a girl, I are, so am I. Yes, you are what you are, so am I.
All right, how's everybody feeling tonight? All right, we trying to get into a little something for you guys. Get everybody up, vibing, music. Come on. We used to go. Now you see everybody, I'm tired of broken street glass and not getting any rest unless the babies sleep. But even then seems like we're trying to creep. Tired of paying these taxes and sending emails and faxes. Tired of crooked cops. I'm tired of black folks complaining that crime don't stop. I wanna go to a place where lovers go and do the things that lovers do. No stress, a sweet caress from me to you. I wanna do the things that we used to do. Say the things we used to say. Just lay around the house all day, every day, all day. We get
far away from here.
We get
far away from here. Far away from here.
Just jump in a taxi cab, pack a bag and get. We get
far away from here. Far away from here. Far away from here. Just jump in a taxi.
I need y'all to get involved, everybody out there. Come on now.
Oh, yeah.
Somebody say far away.
Far away.
Say far away.
Far away.
Say far away.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, yeah.
Come on alive, y'all. Somebody say far away.
Far away.
Say far away.
Far away.
Hey, if they know the song, then sing along with the hook. Come on, right here, baby girl. We getting
far away from here.
We getting
far away from here. Far away from here. Just jump in the taxi cab, pack a bag and get away fast. Far away from here. Far away from here. Far away from here. Just jump in the taxi cab, pack a bag and get away fast.
If it wasn't for Miss Johnson and that BET, we probably never would have been here singing this song for you, yeah. We appreciate you. We thank you, sister. You've changed a lot of lives, done a lot of things that the people can see, and we're so proud to be here. We're getting far away. God bless.
Ladies and gentlemen, Sheila Johnson.
We've been introduced to many different levels of Sheila Johnson, starting with her childhood, learning piano, violinist, being a cheerleader, as well as BT and her kids. Tell me different parts, the parts that you like the most, the parts that stood out the most to you, the parts that resonates best with you, and the parts that you so much didn't understand. I want to have a conversation with you. Tell me a little bit about you in comparison to what you've learned today. But as always, don't forget to like, share, watch more videos, and subscribe to the channel.